Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking about USC football, and I am joined by Mark Colkin, who is the host of the Locked On USC podcast. He is also a writer for weareusc.com, or wearesc.com, excuse me. Make sure I get that credit right for you there. I want to talk about the team heading into this year, but over the course of this offseason, I'm not necessarily the guy that's the most locked in on recruiting and all of that stuff and guys with star ratings and all that stuff, but I kept seeing different things pop up on my timeline. USC gets this big commit over all of these other schools. I look at the 24/7 recruiting rankings for 2026. USC is second with On3. They're currently first. What has changed at USC over the past year or so with their team building strategy? Because it seems like they're opening up their wallets a little bit more now than they maybe were in the previous few seasons.
Yeah. So thanks again for having me back. I'm looking forward to doing this. You mentioned that was probably the biggest factor that's contributing to USC's 2026 recruiting class being ranked number one in the country. So yes, they opened up their wallets. They got their NIL program going in the right direction. I think the biggest thing, the two other biggest things that mattered the most, USC went out and hired a general manager, took a whole bunch of stuff off of Lincoln Riley's plate so he can focus more on being a head coach and not so much on all that stuff that's going on in the background, the NIL negotiations and dealing with agents and handlers and all that kind of stuff. Just focusing on the recruiting part of it. Let Chad Bowden, USC's general manager, who they went and bought from Notre Dame, let him do all the heavy lifting on that type of stuff. And then the other thing that was really important was a renewed emphasis, focusing back in on California recruiting. 2026 is a bumper crop for top-end talent. And USC, I don't know, maybe they were planning to do this all along, but, in Lincoln Riley's first 3 years, he was kind of, utilizing the transfer portal, cherry-picking guys here and there. 2026 class, even though it's pretty evenly balanced, nationally with what they have in California, the emphasis was put back in focusing on the schools in your backyard, the Mater Days, the St. John Boscos, the Centennials, getting those top players in California to stay home. There's no reason to go, choose a school like Ohio State or Clemson or Alabama or Georgia. Stay home. We did it before this way. Let's do it again. And so when you combine NIL, the general manager, and the renewed focus on Southern California recruiting, this is the result. This is what you get. And it's USC acting like USC again.
I think a big reason that they're maybe being forced to act like USC again is we look at USC under Lincoln Riley. We've had a little bit of a backslide. Come in, Caleb Williams is winning the Heisman. You're game away from the college football playoff. The second year, okay, defense is terrible. Thought you fixed that last year with getting D'Anton Lynn, the new defensive coordinator that you took from UCLA. Defense did improve last year. But again, we went from 11 wins to 8 wins to last year to 7 wins. Is Lincoln Riley's patience with the fan base at USC starting to wear thin? And how much of a leash does he got before, we start seeing some fans start to revolt?
So you have two camps when it comes to the USC fan base and how they're perceiving Coach Riley right now. A lot of them are talking themselves into it, convincing themselves, or this is their narrative. This is really Lincoln Riley's second year in the program because he made the mistake of holding on to Alex Grinch for a year too long. So now he's got his defensive coordinator that you talked about, Dan Lynn. Plus, USC finally got behind NIL, kind of chipped that in. So they're looking at, all right, Lincoln Riley, yes, he was close in year one. The stars were aligned. Caleb Williams won the Heisman. Defensively, as terrible as they still led the country in turnover margin. That was that kind of balanced out how bad they were statistically. Last year and the year before that, excuse me, again, you had Alex Grinch returning in 2023, even though you still had Caleb Williams, the Heisman returner, coming back. Nothing worked, though, on defense. Last year, you saw the improvement on the defensive side of the ball. They improved by 10 points per game. And if you actually factor in or you take away all the pick six interceptions that USC's quarterbacks were throwing, they improved by 13 points per game. They went from giving up 34 points per game in 2023, when they were scoring 50 points per game, to giving up only 24 per game, but their scoring average dropped all the way down to 30. There was a significant drop on the offensive side of the ball. And that's what I think caught all of the USC fans by surprise. It's like, wait a minute, Lincoln Riley is an offensive mastermind. What's going on this side of the ball? He's finally got a defense that he can pair up, and it just never came together. What it was really about was when you made the switch to the Big Ten Conference. I get it, there's an adjustment period. But I don't know if Coach Riley felt comfortable with the quarterback play. I know USC fans weren't, and that showed up on the field. So everybody's now hoping, all right, you got your defense in place. It's going to be second year in the system. You are now deeper on that side of the ball. The roster has improved significantly. I mean, they brought in 700 pounds just in two guys to help on the interior of the defensive line: Jamal Jarrett from Georgia, Keyshawn Silver from Kentucky, and then you have all the guys who you've been recruiting who are coming up now as well. They brought in Jakeem Stewart into this class, who reclassified from 2026 into 2025. It's ironic, but the strongest position group is the defensive line at USC right now. Everyone's skepticism is, can Lincoln Riley get his offense to be normal again? Can you eliminate those pick sixes that cause you to lose all those close games on the road? Because you look at the record, it's like it says 7-6. Don't forget, USC opened the season with a win over LSU. They finished the season with a win over Texas A&M. In between then, they lost every game by 7 points or less. They could not win on the road except for the game at UCLA. And if we're being honest, USC playing in the Rose Bowl, that's not a road game. So that's the next step for this program. Win on the road and hope that the offense can catch up to the defense. If that happens, looking at USC's schedule in 2025, it's not out of the question that they can win 9 or 10 games. They can make that big of a difference, that big of a jump in their record.
A huge thing that a lot of coaches that have had, down years during this new NIL era, a thing that you've been like I remember earlier this summer, a few weeks ago, Mike Gundy, he was talking about how different he's building Oklahoma State now, where he's like, yeah, this is the first time we actually went out and tried to buy different players. You're seeing, I know this a lot with the Big 12 schools. We talked to our friend from Baylor a few weeks ago. He said, hey, they changed up how they decided to do things. Texas Tech in the Big 12 has obviously made a lot of different noise too. So I do think it does sound a little weird to be like, hey, Lincoln Riley's actually in his second year at USC now, but it does make sense with how, NIL has just changed college football and how team building goes. Because, Lincoln Riley, he's had bad defenses for the majority of his time as a head coach. And if you're still winning 10, 11 games every single year, why would you have, the urgency to try and fix that if you're still winning a lot of football games? And you mentioned it there. I just remember watching USC last year. We talked last fall. I think we were both pretty optimistic with how USC would perform. And obviously things did not go to plan. And someone that was, rooting for USC, I don't know if I was rooting for USC, but I might have placed a few bets on the Trojans over the course of the year. I was watching college football, flipping games back and forth. I kept seeing like, hey, USC, they're doing pretty well in this game. I think they are going to beat Michigan. Oh, hey, look, they're doing pretty well against Penn State. I think they are going to beat Penn State. It wasn't just like, hey, the offense, obviously you would want to be better under Lincoln Riley. But another big thing with USC last year is that they just kept not even just losing close games, but just blowing a lot of these close games. And, there's a different world where they just finish a lot of these games. They're sitting in the middle of last year, like 7 or 8-0, even though I know that sounds crazy to say for some people that maybe didn't follow them that closely. Has that been an emphasis, that they've been talking about at USC over this offseason?
James, you hit the nail on the head. In every single game last year, USC led in the fourth quarter, except for the Notre Dame game. And in that game, they were driving to tie the score before USC's quarterback, Jaden Mayaba, who had taken over from Miller Moss a few games earlier, threw two back-to-back pick sixes. That was the difference in that game. But every other game, USC held leads in the fourth quarter, and it got to the point where, because they did not have the depth, and defensively, when you're not getting the support on offense that you typically do, you're putting the defense back on the field, and that's what USC was doing. Opposition, they're like, all right, well, if you're going to give us the ball back, we're going to take every opportunity to score on you. And USC's defense was running out of gas at the end of games. I mean, look, they lost Eric Gentry, their best playmaker on that side of the ball, against Penn State when he concussed himself. They lost Bear Alexander in the third game when he decided, you know what, I'm going to quit again. I'm going to hold out. I know I renegotiated multiple times with NIL, but I don't want to play anymore here. So you lost Eric Gentry. You lost Bear Alexander. Anthony Lucas goes down with injury. All of a sudden, your best players on paper, they're not available. And so as the season went along, teams always suffer from attrition as the years go by. USC didn't have the roster. They had little margin for error. So now all of a sudden you're razor thin. And again, you get into the fourth quarter, and when you're on the road, even against teams like Minnesota or Maryland, those teams, look, they're playing at home. They've got Division I football players. And if you're going to help them help themselves, those are the results you get. That game against Penn State is the one game that still, I think, bothers me the most, because you had a big halftime lead. You had a lead in the fourth quarter. You felt like you kind of took your foot off the pedal offensively. You're allowing one player from Penn State, the tight end, to just, turn you into his tramp stamp. I mean, it was crazy. I wanted to use a different word, so I just went there. That's the one game that USC kind of showed the country, showed the nation. We can play with everybody. I just don't know if we can play with everybody for an entire 60 minutes. That happened at Michigan, where they had a lead. The defense broke down at the end of the game. I can bring up every single game. That loss at Minnesota, they actually made the stop, and all of a sudden the Big Ten officials, the replay officials, they said, we're going to take this opportunity to haze USC and break their own replay rules. It was stopped on the field, but when they sent it to replay after PJ Fleck was jumping up and down throwing a temper tantrum, the replay official saying, well, we think he crossed. We don't have proof, but we think he got over the line. Last time I checked, that's not what the rule says. There's got to be verifiable proof they crossed the plane. That never happened. So I know I'm rambling here, but yeah, every loss last year, close, shouldn't have been a loss, could have had a different outcome. And that is the difference between 7 wins and, say, possibly 9 or 10 wins.
Exactly. And if you go 9-3 in the Big Ten with a few marquee wins over LSU,
Right.
that was a very good team. If you did beat Penn State, who made it to the quarterfinals, that's enough of a push where I don't know if you make the playoff, but you're at least, in that kind of bubble region there. Yeah, you're in the conversation.
Right now. Yeah, right now,
exactly.
USC is not part of that conversation. In fact, this offseason, USC's bulletin board has to be full, because they are getting zero love from anybody, whether it's a coaches poll, which is crap anyways, or any of, the preseason, all-American teams, all-conference teams, whatever. USC is just not being shown in a favorable light from the people who vote, who put out their list. And that's okay. I guess, USC's got to prove that they're better than what everybody thinks they're going to be.
Exactly, man. More motivation. I do want to talk about maybe the things that will make USC get into this conversation this year. I want to start on the offensive side of the ball, because Jaden Mayava, the transfer from UNLV, comes in at the end of the year. Miller Moss gets benched, and then USC gets a few nice wins to end the year. You mentioned the Texas A&M bowl game, beat UCLA. What was the other one you guys had? You beat Nebraska, where Mayava had 4 touchdowns. How important is his development to watch this offense, progress back into the Lincoln Riley, high-powered, high-scoring offenses that we all know and love?
If there's concern 1 and concern 1A, it starts the quarterback and the offensive line. Mayava is that quarterback that Lincoln Riley has typically turned into a national name, a star. I mean, he's 6'4", 225 pounds, big arm, athletic, can use his legs to, if the pocket breaks down. He makes life he should be making life difficult for opposing defenses. Last year, he was in an awkward situation. It was Miller Moss's team. He was coming off that huge Holiday Bowl performance against Louisville. He got out of the box really well. Like I said, they beat LSU in dramatic fashion. I mean, after the first 3 games, Miller Moss was part of the Heisman conversation, and then things kind of took a dip. So Jaden, when he arrived, he knew that this was Miller's team at that time. He just kind of had to find his way. And when he was finally thrust into the starter's role, when Coach Riley said, all right, Miller, you had your chance. We're going to go in a different direction now. He now has to assume that leadership role. And I don't know if he had the time or how he went about it, if he had those relationships built yet, where the rest of the teams are going to say, all right, you're our guy. We're going to fall in right behind you. He's had the entire offseason now. He knows he's the guy. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder wondering, am I doing the right thing? So hopefully he takes that approach and Coach Riley can, trim the fat. That's something that's been discussed during this offseason, is taking the decision-making that Jaden has had challenges with and if you can help him make better decisions, his natural ability can do the rest. I mean, he's got the talent surrounding him. He's got wide receivers on the outside with Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane. Coach Riley said this is his best running back room since he's been at USC. They have the pieces on the offensive line to get it done. It's just a matter, can they all bring it together? And can Jaden Mayava be that guy? Can he eliminate the bad decisions, eliminate the untimely interceptions? Quarterbacks are going to throw interceptions. You can't throw back-to-back pick sixes at the end of the game against Notre Dame. It's those types of things that he has to say, all right, you know what? If the throw's not there and I can run for 5 yards, I'll take a base hit single than trying to go for a home run every swing. Absolutely.
I completely agree with that too. And Jaden Mayava is also a guy that's gotten a lot of interest from other, Power 4 programs like the Tippy Top. I believe he originally committed to Georgia before he ended up decommitting, flipping to USC. And the fact that he stayed on USC this year, didn't enter the transfer portal, I think is a good sign that, yes, this is his team. Even though you got Husan Longstreet, that's the 5-star kid that you're able to get from LSU. That's another thing that kind of annoyed me when Julian Lewis, decided to go to Colorado over USC. A lot of people online were like, oh my God, USC's in trouble. Everything's dead. I'm like, this shows that you guys, like, again, I said I don't pay that much attention to recruiting, but I knew before that Longstreet had flipped his commitment to USC before that. So it's not like USC was barren at the quarterback position. I was going.
That whole
go ahead.
Longstreet thing started to come to fruition spring last year, before everyone committed. He showed up at a 5 a.m. practice. He was committed to Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. I'm bad. I thought it was LSU.
So the fact that he showed up for a spring camp practice at 5 a.m. It's like, all right, this young man's serious. He's got USC in the back of his head. He'd rather stay home, be that hometown hero. So yeah, to your point, USC will never struggle to have a quarterback. I mean, they brought in Sam Heward, which is a former 5-star guy out of the transfer portal. So USC's quarterback room has UNLV's former starter, who was, I believe, all Mountain West Conference. He was good enough that Georgia wanted him out of the transfer portal. They were able to keep Husan Longstreet, a 5-star, at home. And then they have Sam Heward transfer in to give you that depth that you need on the bench at quarterback. So the question that, myself and some others have been wondering, God forbid, knock on wood, that Jaden Mayava he's injured or he's having a terrible season. Which quarterback does Lincoln Riley go to first? Does he go to the kid, or does he go to Sam Heward, who's got, experience playing at this level? And this is all about, where is Lincoln Riley? Where is the team's record? What do they need to kind of keep the perception or keep the narrative going that, the program's going in the right direction? The last thing Lincoln Riley needs in 2025 is terrible quarterback play, because now all of a sudden the light's shining on him. Is he really the guy? Is he the guy to bring USC back to where they need to be?
Kevin Stefanski's saying the same thing this year with the Browns. If Joe Flacco gets hurt, who do I go to? We got Kenny Pickett. We got Shadur Sanders. We got Dylan Gabriel. We just signed Tyler Huntley. So
a little
bit different talent discrepancy there. So Yeah, who knows what they're doing? They're getting an arsenal of quarterbacks, and that's how the Browns are going to try and win. We talked about guys that were underrated, that are getting disrespected in the preseason by the national media. I was going through some of your episodes that you've been posting over the last few weeks. It seems like you were very upset of where certain people in the media are ranking this wide receiver core for USC. They got Mekhi Lemon that's returning. They got Jacoby Lane that's returning. They got a transfer from Boise State. Why do you think that this wide receiver core can be one of the best in the conference, if not the entire
And I
country?
know, I'm looking at this through my Cardinal and Gold glasses, but Mekhi Lemon is, some of your viewers, listeners might remember the name Rocket Ishmael. Played for Notre Dame back in the day. Similar type of player, wide receiver, return specialist. When Mekhi Lemon took over as USC's punt returner, kick returner last year, his star took off. I mean, everyone's eyes were like, why has he been sitting on the bench behind Zachariah Branch? He has that type of ability. He is a 1,000-yard type of receiver. He's going to give you 70 catches. He's not afraid to go over the middle. He can run every type of route. Jacoby Lane is the one that really upset me. The one that I think they have him underrated by a lot. Apparently, there's like 11 better wide receivers in the big conference, better than Jacoby Lane. I dare anybody who calls themselves a college football fan to name those 11 wide receivers. Jacoby Lane is literally the guy that caught 7 touchdown passes over the last couple of games of the season for USC. If he is focused and ready to play, he's unguardable. He's 6'4". He has a vertical that's close to 4 feet. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but not by a lot. He has an arm span that just keeps going on forever. He's a vine, and he makes these one-handed catches that just come natural to him. So he's a red zone threat. You can run play action with him, send him deep. You can run him across the middle. I look at Ohio State's wide receiver group. You got Jeremiah, great young guy. You've got, they have one other one. But after that, his name just slips my mind right now. Who else in the big conference would you take your wide receiver core over USC's? I can't think of one. And so when I see these guys, who do the voting on their preseason all-conference teams, and I see Jacoby Lane way down here, and guys who have never played a snap or have a brand new quarterback throwing the ball to him this year, I'm wondering why. What's the rationale behind this? I watched Jacoby Lane literally do what he wanted against teams like Nebraska, Wisconsin, Notre Dame. He has the ability to do some freaky stuff, and that's why both of them are now getting NFL first-round draft grades. So that's why I'm so high on USC's wide receivers.
I don't blame you. I think in the defense of the people that make all of these lists, I feel like the fact that we have an 18-team conference, 17 in the ACC, 16. It's hard. It's hard, and like not everyone plays each other all the time. I think too, sometimes we just look at the stats. We look, hey, how long you've been playing, and Lane obviously has the touchdowns, but not necessarily yards that really pop off the screen. So I think maybe that's part of it. But you're right, man. I think projecting USC forward, if you think they're gonna have a good year, like I think at least I do. I don't know. You might be a little bit more pessimistic. This wide receiver crew, I think, will maybe turn some heads come this fall. I do want to switch a little bit to the defense here and talk about the growth that this team has had on defense over the past year. D'Anton Lynn comes in, not the best defense in all of college football or anything like that, but compared to the previous year was an absolutely significant improvement on that side of the ball. And you mentioned it earlier, the strength of this team might actually be the defensive line. Who are some of these big boys that they got up front? Because I was going through the transfer portal rankings today, and my eyes were just popping out of my head looking at the the weight and the size of some of these guys.
So you're returning Anthony Lucas. Here, I don't have it near. Oh damn it! I don't have my roster near me. Anyways, he's 6'5", 290, I believe. Inside, you have.
I have 6'5", 274, but maybe he's gained weight.
You've got Jamal Jarrett, the big 6'6", 360 pounds, or as Coach Riley said, he's a cheeseburger away from 360 pounds. You've got Keyshawn Silver, similar size, that came from Kentucky. Those are your two guys that are probably going to start inside. Then you have Devin Tompkins. He's a three technique guy. He is a name that USC coaches cannot keep out of their mouth. Whatever has happened from last year, during the offseason, through spring, through player run practices, into fall camp, Devin Tompkins is the name that everybody in this country should remember. You've got Jade Abasiri, another three technique from Minnesota, who's into his second year. Another 6'5" guy, 290 pounds. I mentioned Jakeem Stewart. He was one of the most sought after recruits coming out of the state of Louisiana. His nickname is Thanos. He's considered one of those can't miss recruits. Some of it typically ends up at LSU. He's at USC. And then you've got guys on the edge like Cameron Fountain, who's into his second year. Braylon Shelby, a third-year player. The recruiting class that brought in a guy named Gus Cordova. There was so much depth. I didn't mention the name Kobe Pepe, who was USC's nose tackle last year. He returns. There's Carlon Jones, who was part of the 2025 class, or the 2024 class, who it was a battle between USC and Ohio State. The depth that USC, Coach Henney, Eric Henderson, Sean Nua, Dan Lynn have put together on that side of the ball, I think everyone is going to be talking about where did USC's defensive line come from all of a sudden? Because they were good last year. They weren't. This year they have the potential to be great, one of the best in the country, and it's all because they have depth. They literally can run 3 rotations, and the drop off from 1 to 3, minimal.
Yeah, I do think you need a
Absolutely.
good D line, especially in the Big Ten Conference, because that has always been a thing with the Big Ten Conference, especially some of these teams that you played last year, like Minnesota's always been a team that is able to get the big bodies up front. You're playing Iowa this year. I was going through the Bruce Feldman Freaks list today, and like 3 of the Iowa offensive linemen are on that list. So you're definitely gonna need them when you're going
just look how
the Hawkeyes are coming
Michigan
to town.
did, how they won their national championship. What they did last year. When you have a defensive line that can get pressure on the quarterback from the edge and make life miserable from the inside, like they did with their 2 guys, everything else gets easier on the defensive side of the ball. Your guys in the secondary don't have to cover as long, so they go from good to great, even because the quarterback can get the ball out. Your linebackers are now freed up to make plays. USC is at that spot right now. Now they just have to show it on the field.
Yeah, that was the thing too. When I was, it was more like the last few years. You kind of talked to people covering Oklahoma and their roster construction, what Brent Venables was doing there, and they were just talking about the improvements with them. I mean, there's a lot of problems with Oklahoma, specifically last year, but a big thing that they were focusing on was, hey, look at just the size of these guys and just getting massive human beings. And I think even some years with Lick and Riley at Oklahoma, there was barely even a few guys over 300 pounds. So the fact that, it's just a radical difference now, I think is something that's really something to be positive about with USC. I do want to ask you one final question here, and then we'll get out of here. Which is going to be the tougher road game for USC this year, at Notre Dame or at Oregon?
I'm going to always go with at Notre Dame. That is a rivalry game. It could be the last game in this series if the powers that be don't pull their heads out of their crevices and get this contract extended and get it figured out. There's so much emotion involved in that game. Anytime USC has won a national championship, they beat Notre Dame. I mean, those programs are so intertwined. There's a respect there. Notre Dame was the runner-up last year to the national championship game to Ohio State. They're expected to, be one of those teams to get back into the playoffs, if not make a run for the national championship. That's why I'm going to go with Notre Dame. That's not saying that the game up in Eugene is not going to be difficult. But again, I'm looking at their roster. I'm thinking, well, they're breaking in a quarterback that I don't know how good he's going to be. When he was at UCLA, he was throwing an interception for every touchdown he threw. He actually benched himself because he didn't like what he was doing there, and he eventually ended up at Oregon. Oregon has built their team through the transfer portal. Yes, they recruit very well, but it's the guys they bring in out of the portal. And I don't know if you can get that type of chemistry when you're cobbling a team together. I watched it happen at USC. It worked great in that first year for Lincoln Riley. These last couple of years, it hasn't worked out so well. So I'm going to be interested to see how Oregon is able to handle all the players that they brought in to kind of, put a Band-Aid over where they need help. I mean, they took USC's best offensive lineman, Emmanuel Preyon. So again, teams have to hit the transfer portal. Notre Dame does it the right way. And I think USC is trying to do what they've been doing. That's why they brought Chad Bowden in as their general manager. Do it through recruiting. Develop that chemistry that way, and then go out and get one or two guys to plug in and fill those holes. That's where they're at right now. For me, it's always going to be USC versus Notre Dame as a toughest game, especially on the road in South Bend. Strange stuff happens there. I mean, fortunately, they don't grow grass anymore. I mean, in the past, they would do that. USC had so much team speed, they would let the grass grow longer for a couple of weeks just to try and slow them down. It's that type of stuff.
So leave the sprinklers on for an extra hour the night before, just really sop it up. Exactly. I love that you said Notre Dame. Hopefully, unless things change, we should be doing a similar type of podcast with Notre Dame, an expert from Notre Dame this week. So make sure if you want to view that, make sure you hit subscribe. Mark, do you want to tell us where we can find all of your work, and then we'll head out of here?
I put up my articles over there. I also take part in the Inside the Trojan Huddle panel podcast show that we do once a week. And when I'm not doing my writing, I'm hosting the Locked On USC podcast 5 times a week. So yeah, you can find me everywhere and anywhere. If you want to talk about USC, you'll be able to.
Absolutely, man. You're not hard to find. Not hard to find. Again, thank you for watching. If you got this far, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment what you think USC's record's going to be this year, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you for watching.